wealth, power, influence. J.P. Morgan didn't just play the game of money, he wrote the rules. He owned the first billion-dollar company. He shaped the country's most powerful industries, and, more than once, the entire economy of the United States balanced on the stroke of his pen. One signature, and a company was saved. One decision, and another, collapsed. Hated by many, admired by some, there will never be another man quite like him. This is the story of J.P. Morgan. John Pierpont Morgan was born in 1837 in Hartford, Connecticut, into wealth, privilege, and expectations. But from the very beginning, his body betrayed him. Frail, constantly ill, plagued by migraines, Morgan spent most of his childhood in bed, reading, while other boys played outside. His father, Junius Spencer Morgan, a stern, calculating banker, believed discipline and education would forge strength where nature had not. By his teenage years, John had studied across Boston, Switzerland, Germany, mastering finance, and learning the quiet power of discipline. At 19, he stepped onto Wall Street, a quiet apprentice, sending market reports back to his father's firm. But inside, ambition burned. At 22, he took his first major risk, buying an entire shipment of Brazilian coffee on credit. It was bold, reckless, and profitable. His father scolded him, but the message was clear. Morgan had the instincts of a predator. Then came love and loss. At 24, he married Amelia Sturgis, a woman he adored. But within months, tuberculosis stole her away. Heartbroken, angry, Morgan buried his pain under work, turning grief into a relentless drive for power. And then, the Civil War erupted. Morgan seized the opportunity, financing arms deals, speculative trades, the kind of moves that made him rich, but also earned him a reputation, ruthless, cold, untouchable. The Civil War ended, and with it came chaos. Economic booms, crushing recessions, a country racing to rebuild. Railroads were the arteries of a growing nation, but they were a mess. Hundreds of competing lines, cutthroat price wars, companies collapsing overnight. Most men saw disaster, but J.P. Morgan saw opportunity. In 1871, he partnered with Anthony Drexel to create Drexel, Morgan & Company, the firm that would one day become J.P. Morgan Chase. With discipline and precision, Morgan began buying up broken railroads, restructuring their debts, and consolidating them into powerful, efficient networks. This process, later known as Morganization, turned chaos into order and gave Morgan unparalleled control. By the 1880s, he dominated nearly one-third of the nation's railroads, dictating prices and crushing competitors. His presence in boardrooms, legendary. Tall, broad-shouldered, piercing eyes, and a nose scarred by rosacea, a mark he despised. One glare, and entire rooms fell silent. But power always makes enemies. In 1901, his attempt to build a railroad monopoly, Northern Securities, brought him face-to-face with President Theodore Roosevelt. A historic antitrust case followed, and Morgan's empire was broken apart. But the loss, it barely slowed him down. Morgan was already turning to his next empire. If railroads made him rich, steel made him a legend. By 1901, Andrew Carnegie's steel empire ruled the industry, but Carnegie was ready to retire. Morgan, sensing opportunity, approached with a single question. "What's your price?" Carnegie scribbled a number on a slip of paper. $480 million, an unimaginable sum at the time. Morgan didn't hesitate. With one stroke of a pen, U.S. Steel was born, the world's first billion-dollar corporation, producing two-thirds of America's steel and cementing Morgan as the undisputed king of industry. But Morgan wasn't done. He financed Thomas Edison, then merged Edison Electric into what became General Electric. He fueled the rise of AT&T, laying the foundation for modern communications. Everywhere he turned, Morgan built giants, transforming industries into streamlined, unstoppable machines. To his allies, he was a genius. To his enemies, a ruthless monopolist, strangling competition. But love him or hate him, Morgan had become something greater than a banker. He was the architect of corporate America. Then came the crisis. The panic of 1893. Banks collapsed, businesses failed. The U.S. Treasury's gold reserves dwindled. The dollar itself teetered on collapse. And when the government was powerless, President Grover Cleveland called one man, J.P. Morgan. In a move that stunned the world, Morgan assembled a private syndicate, injected $65 million in gold, and stabilized the American economy, effectively saving the nation from financial ruin. Critics accused him of profiteering. Admirers hailed him as a savior. And then, in 1907, it happened again. The market crashed. Banks failed. Panic swept the streets. Morgan summoned the nation's top bankers to his Madison Avenue library. He locked the doors and refused to let anyone leave until a rescue plan was signed. For 3 days, with the fate of the economy in his hands, Morgan brokered deals, infused capital, calmed the markets. His intervention prevented a complete collapse, but it also exposed a terrifying truth. One man held more power than the United States government itself, and that truth led directly to the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913. A system designed to ensure that no single individual could ever again control the nation's finances. By the early 1910s, the age of unchallenged tycoons was fading. Public outrage over the money trust grew louder, and Morgan was called to testify before Congress. There, under the harsh glare of cameras and relentless public scrutiny, the once untouchable banker looked tired, older, almost human. Behind the scenes, his health was failing. He battled insomnia, paranoia, and the crushing weight of a lifetime spent chasing control. Then, in 1912, fate intervened. Morgan had booked passage on the Titanic, but canceled at the last minute due to illness. Weeks later, he read the headlines, his friends among the dead. A year later, while traveling in Rome, J.P. Morgan died quietly at the age of 75. At his funeral, kings, presidents, and industrial titans gathered to honor the man who had reshaped the modern world. His bank survived, growing into the global powerhouse we know today as J.P. Morgan Chase, with over $3 trillion in assets. But Morgan's true legacy is more than numbers. He built the foundation of modern finance, proving that one man with enough vision and willpower could hold the world in his hands. J.P. Morgan was more than a banker. He was a force of nature. To some, a hero, to others a villain. But his story is the story of America itself. Ambition, innovation, risk, and reinvention. Over a century later, every time you swipe a card, make a trade, or watch the stock market rise and fall, remember this: the world still moves to rhythms first written by J.P. Morgan. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the life of a man who shaped history, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. because the next story might just change the way you see the world.